The Moss Report is brought to you by Mycolife, makers of the world's best mushroom extracts, including the Moss Method mushroom formula, available exclusively at mycolife.us. Hello, healers. My name is Ben, and this is the Moss Report. I'm here today with my father, author and founder of the Moss Report, Dr. Ralph W. Moss. Good morning, Dad.
Good morning, Ben.
So today we're going to be discussing the subject of ginger and cancer. I'm super interested to hear what you found, especially since I love ginger so much. It's really something that I crave and I kind of fiend for. Just ask anyone who's ever sat down and had sushi with me, and I've been stealing their ginger with my chopsticks. So I'm really hopeful that you found something good to share with us about ginger.
Well, I certainly did. I really must say I was astonished by this because I think of ginger like so many things, cardamom, cloves, all the wonderful spices of the Far East, if you will, and the Spice Islands and all that. I mean, it's a lovely condiment, but I had no idea how powerfully anti-cancer this compounds within ginger are.
You can kind of taste it with ginger. It's one of the few things that really, when you eat it, feels like it's doing something, not just in your mouth, but for me anyway, right after I eat it, I feel very energized, like something's going on. So what does the science say about it?
There's quite a bit of scientific literature on this. I found a total of 3,900 articles. There's been like an explosion of research on this and as on many natural products. So until 1995, articles on the health effects of ginger were appearing at an average of one per year, Ben. After 1995, they started to climb the number, and now they appear one per calendar day practically.
Wow.
You can see that there's a lot of interest in ginger, especially coming from Asia. And that's what we're going to be discussing today.
Or was there anything in particular that brought this subject up for you that made you want to dig into it further besides the number of studies that are being done?
Yeah, well, we have a relative who's dealing with early stages of chronic lymphocytic leukemia, CLL, and so I'm always on the lookout for articles relating to natural treatments of CLL or leukemia in general. And that's how it came to my attention, because I have, these automatic notices whenever an article appears in PubMed or in other places on that particular topic.
There was a study done on specifically on CLL and ginger.
It was a study done on leukemia cells in general.
Okay.
But what makes this especially wonderful article is that it deals only with leukemic stem cells.
Oh.
So it's right in our wheelhouse. In my book, The Moss Method, as you know, one of the gears of the Moss Method is the topic of cancer stem cells. The first discovery of stem cells in malignancy were in leukemic cells.
I believe it. I mean, that is where the cancer stem cells live, in the blood. So if they're studying the blood for cancer, that makes sense that they would find the cancer stem cells there.
And they did. And that was the scientist named Lapidot in the laboratory of John Dick in the early 1990s. So you can date the discovery from 1994. And as we've discussed in other conversations, there are tens of thousands of articles now on cancer stem cells. It's a huge and a very important topic within biology. But these people sort of went back to the original roots of the stem cell issue and looked at certain kinds of cells. This is a test tube or petri dish type of study from a laboratory. And they compared the effects of ginger and turmeric, as well as 3 or 4 different types of chemotherapy, of common forms of chemotherapy like cyclophosphamide and doxorubicin.
That was an interesting study to be looking at different types of chemo and natural substances in the same lab.
We're on the same wavelength here. as I've said many times, one of the three gears of the Moss method is the notion of the cancer stem cell and what natural agents would counteract the cancer stem cells. So we've written and talked about things like resveratrol and soy and the sprouts that we've done a conversation about.
Parsley and
right. So there are studies
turmeric
on this, but I must say that this study just blows everything else out of the water. And they did a direct comparison of ginger and turmeric in killing cancer stem cells, leukemic stem cells in this case, and hands down, the ginger wins the contest. And I'll give you the exact figures. And I mean, it's a very, very exacting paper, and they actually give the numbers. It's calculated by how much do you need in order to kill a certain number of or percentage of the cancer stem cells. And we'll get into that. But that's how I came to, quote unquote, discover this paper. And I am in touch with the senior author. They were kind enough to share the full paper with me, although I do believe it is available online if you search. But we'll give the link in our description.
Okay, so let's get into it, though. So what does the study say?
So before we get into the science, I'd like to just clarify something, a vocabulary issue, and that is that there are two main components within the ginger. And one is called gingerol, which is the word ginger, plus ol, like a common chemical word ending, like alcohol. This is gingerol. And the other one is shogaol. Shoga is the Japanese term for ginger. So these are the two things that we're looking out for and that the authors of this study from Thailand are comparing.
So these are the different compounds you're saying that are in ginger.
Right. The interesting thing is that gingerol turns into shogaol or converts to shogaol under the impact of heat.
Yeah.
This is very important because we know from another source what the balance is between the gingerol and the shogaol. And the anti-cancer portion, the bigger of the two by far, is in the shogaol.
Interesting.
Now, people don't usually want to have a lot of shogaol in their ginger because it would indicate more processing of the ginger, and the flavor wouldn't be quite as sharp. So some of the best powdered ginger products are very high in gingerol, but we don't want that. That's not for health purposes. We want to emphasize the shogaol.
And that would be gotten if you had fresh ginger and then cooked it.
Or ginger powder. So what I've done to emphasize the shogaol is I bought a pound of ginger powder, of ground ginger.
Okay.
And then the best brand that, according to people who test these things, the brand that has the freshest and the best taste and no contamination and so forth, organic. And then I roasted that in my air fryer at a low temperature. I think it was about 200 or 250 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes, stirring it periodically and until I could fill a spice jar with the resulting roasted ginger powder.
And Ralph's Science Kitchen.
and it changed the taste. It became what had started out incredibly sharp, I mean, almost like horseradish, became very mild. And that was the conversion of the gingerol to the shogaol.
All right, just my instinct would tell me that the sharper, more potent taste would have the stronger effect, but you're saying in this case, it's not.
Right. So that's what I thought also when I got into this, but no, the science doesn't say that. Okay. The science says that you want the shogaol, and you're going to get more of that if you gently roast the powder and the high gingerol powder and turn it into a high shogaol powder.
Or, I'm assuming, fresh ginger also
It's the
cooked or
same
roasted.
story. It's the same story, right? Yeah. Now I want to talk about what these scientists in Thailand discovered,
Okay.
and I'll say that I have complete confidence in them. The university that they work at is one of the biggest in Thailand. Beautiful, beautiful university, and there are about 8 authors on the paper from the medical school, and it's published in a well-known British medical journal. And they give the calculations down to a hundredth of a percentage point. I mean, they almost overdo the accuracy of what they're reporting. But they looked at about 10 different compounds and compared their effect on the leukemia stem cells. And I'll just give you the highlights of what they found. So they looked at 4 different kinds of chemotherapy. Now, again, we're talking about leukemia stem cells, which are hard to kill with conventional means. Both chemotherapy and radiation are notorious for effectively killing non-stem cell cancer stem cells, but not so good at killing the cancer stem cells. And we can sort of see why and what's going on when they give chemotherapy to leukemia patients. The drug cyclophosphamide, also known as Cytoxan, very common workhorse drug in the field of oncology. I mean, this goes back to the 1960s. And that drug was very weak against leukemia stem cells. Cytarabine, another chemo drug, was also weak. One of the most common drugs, another workhorse in oncology, called doxorubicin or adriamycin, actually was very strong. It was the strongest of all the agents tested.
Okay.
But we'll put that one aside for a moment.
Versus leukemia
Stem cells. Yes, so it was very effective. So people who say that chemotherapy doesn't kill leukemic stem cells, we have to put a little footnote on that, and I'll come back to that.
Sure.
Among the natural agents, the shogaol was the blow-away winner. It was extremely potent against leukemic stem cells. Not quite as potent as doxorubicin or adriamycin, but close. And I'll give you the numbers. The gingerol was about 1/25th as effective as the shogaol. So you see why I'm going to the trouble of roasting. It's a bit of a pain, but it's worth it. You are increasing, as you increase from the gingerol to the shogaol, you're increasing by 25-fold the anti-cancer stem cell activity, at least in leukemia. And then here's the interesting thing, that the turmeric, curcumin, which I did a whole chapter on in the Moss method, is about 1/3 or 1/4 as effective as the shogaol. In our lifetimes, we've seen the transition from the kill-em-all type of approach of the poisonous chemotherapy to the targeted drugs. And that's certainly been the case with chronic lymphocytic leukemia, that the harsh chemotherapy of yesteryear is almost gone as a treatment. And nowadays you have the Bruton TKI drugs, so-called, and targeted drugs. Things like curcumin and the ginger compounds are really targeted drugs. But what makes them different and perhaps superior to the other more patented pharmaceutical drugs is that they're targeting markers of the cancer stem cells. So this just leapfrogs over a lot of other drugs that are out there, because not only are they not poisonous, they're actually very healthy for you. For instance, the gingerol is very anti-inflammatory. In my presentation, I present a paper which is a randomized clinical trial, recently came out on the use of ginger to combat chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. A big problem in this world. And it's very effective, and was now, again, proven by a very rigorous study coming out of Australia with multiple authors and, a lot of good pedigree. So I think It is famous for relieving side effects of chemo and just of malaise, and this has been known, I would say, for hundreds of years. That
Sure.
in fighting against seasickness was the original thing, and maybe thousands of years because it goes back to the early days of Ayurvedic medicine in India. Ben, I did want to go get a little bit into the numbers because I think this is sort of keeping me up with excitement
No,
at
no. I
night.
mean,
Here,
I'm all into it. Go for
yeah,
it.
yeah. So it takes. Let's take the drug cyclophosphamide again, one of the very early forms of chemotherapy that is used, still approved for all the four major forms of leukemia and for many other forms of cancer, including breast cancer. We have another relative who has had cyclophosphamide within the past year for a different form of cancer. So it's still very much a workhorse of the field. This drug has almost no effect on leukemic stem cells. It took 400 micrograms per milliliter, which is how they measure these things, to kill about 50% of the drugs. 400. But with the drug, with Shogaol, it only took 3 micrograms per milliliter. Yeah. Shogaol from ginger is 133 times more powerful than cyclophosphamide.
I would venture to guess that when the cyclophosphamide was developed, the existence of leukemic cancer stem cells was not even known.
Of course not. No, it was 30 years later. It is still used. And if you think about the very aggressive forms of leukemia, one of the big problems is that those cells are multiplying so fast that they needed something that would kill off a lot of cells very quickly. Because otherwise, with acute leukemias, people were dying within weeks or a few months of the time that the disease was diagnosed. It was very, very tragic condition, especially for young people. So it was a big advance of the day that if you just sort of poisoned the blood-forming system, you would buy some time, and then over time they improved the protocols and they included other drugs, including adriamycin or doxorubicin, which was discovered, which is as you might gather from the name, is a kind of anti-cancer antibiotic.
What I was going to say.
It was discovered in Italy along the shores of the Adriatic Sea, hence the name adriamycin. And that was a big advance because, as we can see from the data in this study from Thailand, there it only took 0.6 or 0.7 micrograms per milliliter to have the same effectiveness that it took 400 of the cyclophosphamide. So adriamycin is a lot more effective, and it is included in a lot of protocols for many different kinds of cancer. The problem is, as far as I understand, and I have done some research on this, not laboratory research, but library research, that it isn't really specific to cancer stem cells. What's happening is that it's just a very, very poisonous drug. And if you don't make special efforts, you can damage the heart muscle. It's notorious for that. Nowadays, doctors have ways of minimizing that from happening. And by the way, I guess I will need to repeat that this is not, I don't mean any of this as an attack on the use of chemotherapy or conventional therapy. I mean, there are good reasons why these things are used, but it's just really...
But it does kind of fill a gap where you've got some conventional drugs that are fighting the leukemic cells and not targeting the cancer stem cells, the leukemic stem cells. So if you can do both, that's better, right?
Absolutely. And also they're doing it at a great cost, not just financially, but a great cost in terms of the toxicity. Why toxicity? Because the drugs, the chemotherapy drugs that we're talking about, are not particularly specific to the cancer. and they're killing a lot of normal cells, which translates into toxicity. So there's a big price to pay for using them, although it is necessary in certain circumstances to use them.
Right.
So this study is very valuable for us, not just in the information it's yielding about ginger. What I'm suggesting is to make the basis of the quote-unquote treatment of your daily regimen to include these things, a golden milk. And golden milk is I don't know where the phrase golden milk originated, but the concept of it is hundreds, if not thousands of years old. It's a mixture of herbs and spices, I would say, that you can then add to a milk base. It doesn't have to be cow milk. We'll get into that in a minute. And then to that golden milk powder, you would add an equal amount of the roasted ginger. Now, I have a very strong preference for these things because not only have I thought a lot about this, but I've also tried these things out. And I'd like to bring in my props here, Ben, because
Sure. I like show and tell.
Okay, good. So I'll start with this.
Soy milk.
Yes, but one particular brand. They don't know that I'm going to promote their product, but there's a reason for this. First of all, it is the original, as far as I know, the soy milk that's first hit the American market, authentic, organic, Eden Foods, Eden Soy. Why would I favor this over the more readily available ones in the supermarket? We know how much of the isoflavones are in this. The serving is 8 ounces, an 8-ounce cup, and it says right on the label, 75 milligrams per serving naturally occurring isoflavones.
Nice.
So that's because it's a bit thicker. It's the complete, product made from whole soybeans and so forth. So, and I learn a lot by calling the companies and talking to their representatives. You can learn quite a bit from having a nice, friendly conversation with these people. So these people, Eden, they were very forthcoming a while ago, but they were very forthcoming with me and told me all the details that I wanted to know.
Nice.
The other company, the big one that's owned by a big conglomerate, couldn't even provide me with the amount of isoflavone. They didn't know what I was even talking about. So, and this tastes fine. And it tastes better, by the way, if you either put it in the refrigerator, drink it cold, or if you heat it up. So I want to heat this up. I take 8 ounces of this and warm that up. And then to that, I will add a golden milk formula. There are a couple of very good ones available. This is the one that I'm currently using. There's also another one, Gaia, which I think was also
pre-mixed, powdered.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So you can't read this. It's tiny, tiny print.
I'm assuming it's a mixture of these compounds that we're talking about: turmeric and ginger and other things.
So turmeric is the first ingredient, and another standardized form of turmeric, in other words, to bring out the curcuminoids, is a second one, and then there's other things: coconut water. Some of other things. And then way down, it says organic ginger, and then cardamom and black pepper. So
okay, but is it roasted ginger? We don't know.
We don't know. It's tasty. It's good, but I would never rely on this. You understand? For the ginger, it's a good source of turmeric. Very good source of turmeric. And it's a tasty mixture because they put some interesting things in here. Ashwagandha. Right. It's very nice, very pleasant. So I would heat up, for one portion, I'd heat up 8 ounces of the Eden soy milk, and then I would add 1 scoop, which is 1 teaspoon, of the golden milk. It comes with its own little scoop, by the way. So there's my scoop. And then it's nice, beautiful color to it. There's that. Okay. And then... so that's perfectly fine. Then to that, you would add an equal amount, a scoop, of toasted ginger powder. And this is how much I made. And it's real, again, you'd have to have about a half hour of time to keep an eye on it. But if you have that kind of time, you can make your own. Haven't found an equivalent product on the market anywhere else. So
So you're preferentially choosing the powder just because it's easier to sort of mix into things rather than roasting the whole ginger.
right. Because I don't know, I'd have to still grind the ginger when I was done. I don't think I would get any particular, and I'm not
It's
looking
very
for.
fibrous,
It is.
Yeah.
And this is very smooth. This will mix right in. I know because I did it this morning, and it's very pleasant. It's very pleasant smelling, and it lost the spiciness, the heat of the raw ginger powder, which
My favorite part.
right. And in normal times, you would think, oh, I ruined it, But so this is a big revelation that the anti-cancer portion is actually far, far stronger in the roasted. This is a golden milk that I made myself.
Okay. It's a powder.
It's a powder.
Okay.
A little darker. And I can smell, I forget, I didn't, I wrote down somewhere, but I don't have it right at hand, what all the things that I put in it, but I just sort of improvised a bit. I used the Gaia as my guideline in terms of what I was going to put in it. And I looked online at different formulas and so forth, but I should write down next time exactly what I put in. But you can improvise a bit because the main thing is you want to have the turmeric and you want to have the ginger. So to this, again, I would take 1 teaspoon of this and 1 teaspoon of the roasted powdered ginger to a cup.
If I'm remembering correctly from our podcast on turmeric, on curcumin, a little black pepper is advisable. Is that right?
You have to. You need it in order to potentiate the curcumin.
Okay.
It makes it 20 times more effective, 20 times more to add black pepper.
Okay, so now we got pepper, powdered roasted ginger,
right?
Turmeric powder,
right?
And this sounds like
I
see where we're going with this. Can we just make a curry?
You could do that too. Oh, but I didn't. What I didn't show. I mean, I picked up the cinnamon, which is fine also.
Okay, yeah, right.
But another very surprising one is this. This is not something I wouldn't have predicted. Ground turmeric. So they're organic, great value ground turmeric, which I I bought it at Walmart. And
I'm confused. I thought we already mentioned turmeric.
We did mention it, but if you're making your own, you're going to need a source of ground turmeric, and this is the one that's most forward in terms of the curcumin.
Oh.
That's readily available to us, and it's it's organic and it's inexpensive and it tastes good.
Let me see which one that is again. What is it? And how do we know that one has the good qualities that we want?
From Consumerlab.com.
Oh, okay, great.
Which I got a lot of information about the ginger products too. So they did taste tests on the different powders that are out there. There is no brand of ginger powder that is both high in the shogaol and also tasty and not burnt tasting and not musty flavor. Or this problem can go wrong. Things can go wrong in making something like a ginger powder, especially if it's coming from a long distance. So there's no one. So my conclusion after looking at bulk supplements, I bought the Frontier one because it is the best, the freshest and very, very spicy, which of course is a sign of the gingerol. But the point is, none of them was exactly what I was looking for. In other words, being fresh and healthy and also high in the shogaol. I had to make that myself, and that wasn't hard, But
well, I want to just interject here from a chef's point of view.
Yeah.
That when you make a curry, for example, the first thing that I do is put all of my spice blend together, and I put it in a frying pan, a dry frying pan, and I basically shake it around until it starts getting smoky a little bit and starts to smell. And then I take that and I put that aside to mix with the curry as I'm building the curry. So I just wonder, of course, things like should you, for the sake of the turmeric, for example, does cooking the turmeric have an effect on the curcumin quantity and so forth? I don't have that kind of information, and I'm not sure you do either. So,
Well, I talk about in the Moss method, I talk about there's a whole section on synergy because we're counting on the synergy. In other words, that turmeric and different substances would have a greater than additive effect in terms of the cancer stem cells.
mm-hmm.
That's why, by the way, people are gonna wonder about this, but I didn't mention why soy. Why soy milk? You could use almond milk. You could use cow milk. This is the soy isoflavones also kill cancer stem cells. Mm-hmm. I can't quantify how much they do compared to the ginger or the turmeric, but they do have an anti-cancer stem cell effect. So I'm trying to sort of triangulate as much as possible against the cancer cells. It isn't a matter of either or in terms of doing conventional therapy or these other treatments, which are truly complementary. I wouldn't expect the foods to just simply be a treatment ever for cancer, but I think they could be a very powerful adjuvant. When I think about doses, I usually try to find a clinical trial that was using the substance that I'm interested in, because I figure that's where the rubber hits the road. The people doing the clinical trial usually want that trial to succeed, right? So they're going to give a tolerable dose, and they have done laboratory research on this and so forth. And there was an Australian clinical trial, the one that I mentioned that showed that ginger was effective against the chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. Okay. And in their intervention, they used 1.2 grams per day of ginger powder. That was 4 capsules per day and was equal to half a teaspoon per day of dried ginger. Now, you heard me say that you put a teaspoon into the drink, but that's my rough calculation that you're not going to consume all of that ginger. Some of it's going to go into the liquid that you're going to drink. Some of it just gets left behind, either in the process of cooking and so forth. So I think that a teaspoon, that's a safe amount. I'm not aware of any serious side effects that are associated with eating ginger. It's been used for thousands of years. So I think that that's a reasonable amount, is 1 teaspoon per day in the drink, and then figuring you're going to get about a half a teaspoon inside you.
That's great.
Which is very, very easy to do. Very, very easy to do. And I'll give a formula in the notes, what I call Shogal Forward golden milk powder, which makes 1 cup of powder, which is 20 servings. And if this wasn't crazy enough, I have to tell you there was a study done on gingerol, which was the more pungent part of the ginger plant,
the raw ingredient,
which was a clinical trial in people with type 2 diabetes, something I know quite a bit.
Diabetes, okay.
Type 2.
Yes.
The ginger group, the group getting ginger, had a big drop in their blood sugar levels, about 20 points on the meter, compared to an increase in the meter with placebo.
Just from the addition of taking...
Yeah. Oh. Taking ginger for 3 months helped improve blood sugar control, reduced inflammation, boosted antioxidant activity in people with type 2 diabetes.
So do we know what the mechanism for that action was? I mean, it's got something to do with the metabolism, I'm assuming.
It does, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
I didn't get into that too much. The A1C went down by
20 points. That's not insignificant.
Oh, it's very significant. It could be the difference between being pre-diabetic and being totally normal in metabolism. The insulin resistance, the insulin levels were reduced, and the insulin resistance was reduced, and the inflammation as measured by this CRP blood marker a significant drop in inflammation markers,
Mm.
unlike in the placebo group.
And we know inflammation can be a precursor to cancer as well.
Yeah, long term it could be
So this is a
definitely
very potent preventative
very,
effect for
very
people too,
right.
not just for people trying to chase down a diagnosis of leukemia or what have you.
Right. In the nausea study, it reduced nausea and vomiting from 75% to 53%. So it was about, whatever, however you want to measure that 25% absolute reduction. And 27% of the people who got the placebo capsules had vomiting by seasickness, and just 4% in the people who got the ginger. And it improved quality of life. It eased fatigue. It made the nausea less severe. In fact, fewer people taking ginger while getting chemo faced malnutrition. 41% of the people in the placebo group were suffering from malnutrition, and that was reduced to 18%. It cut in
Wow.
half the chance of getting malnutrition, because just not feeling so nauseous, you could eat. But
Hmm.
it was enough
Mm.
nausea from the chemo
I
that
see.
people were going into the state of
Oh, this
malnutrition.
is so important.
Yeah. And, I remember back in the 60s, all of this was talked about for a long, long time, about the nausea and the vomiting and so forth.
Right.
I mean, seasickness, but it never was quite so well documented. So it was more easily dismissed as folk, old wives' tales or folk tales or whatever.
Right.
Now we have the goods. We have the receipts,
Yeah.
that this really, really does work.
So I just want to interject that there are a lot of people out there who are taking cannabis to try to do this same effect, but they're also getting the additional effects of cannabis, whereas something like a ginger product could have the same effect without the additional psychoactive compounds.
Right. No, it just makes you feel good. Doesn't well, maybe the cannabis does too, but
Well,
without
but I
alter.
mean, there may be people out there who are not specifically looking for that effect,
Of
who
course,
just want the anti-nausea effect.
absolutely. Yeah. And we do know one of the great things, I'm so excited about the fact that this big laboratory at a big major Chiang Mai medical center in Thailand is doing these studies with natural agents and cancer stem cells. This is what I've been dreaming about, Ben. This is why I wrote, one of the main reasons that I wrote the Morse method, because I feel like, what's wrong with these people, with this world, that people haven't glommed onto the cancer stem cell as the breakthrough that it really is. And one of the reasons being that the things that we've known now for 20 years that do kill the cancer stem cells are these natural agents, many of which are spices from the East. And now we
Yeah.
see Asian clinics and Asian research laboratories with the highest levels of knowledge and sophistication, right on the point, right?
Yeah.
That it's these spices and these herbs and these natural products that have very low, if any, toxicity and remarkable effectiveness against the cancer and leukemia stem cells. It's a dream come true.
It's
If
fantastic. And such a ubiquitous product. I mean, you can get ginger powder practically anywhere. Every grocery store carries it. So who knew that it had all of this helpfulness in terms of fighting cancer and
and
specifically cancer stem cells for leukemia? Wow.
I
That's
got
great news.
I got a pound of it organic for under $20.
Hmm.
I mean, it's
Amazing.
it's almost a giveaway
I
because
know we always get into this situation like, it's just amazing how much benefits you can get from these phytochemicals.
this is a breakthrough. This article,
Fantastic research, Dad. Way to get into that study, break down all those numbers and see. I mean, this is not even something that I think your average person would be able to do. So for you to go and take a look at that study and report on it is absolutely a boon for everyone. So thank you for doing that.
you're welcome. The beauty of this is that you can use this preventatively because you're going to start getting at the root of the leukemia, which is in the cancer stem cells. Nobody disputes that. It's also what's left over oftentimes after you've had otherwise successful treatment.
So thanks again for now for the Moss Report. I'm Ben Moss. How are you healing today?